Hello, everybody. Welcome to Resourceful Humans. I am your host, Corey Haber, and today I have with me Mahen and Jennifer. Both together have 30 plus years of experience in the recruiting and talent acquisition department of HR, and they are both very excellent at what they do. They're going to give us the internal and external perspectives today and give us some tips on that job seeking and recruiting area. So thanks for both of you coming on. I'm so happy and excited to have you.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I want to jump right in and just kind of hear about what you feel right now because of the pandemic. What are the biggest challenges that are happening to job seekers?
Go ahead, Mahen.
Because I'm in the market now. I can say that the challenges are there's a lot of folks out there right now. You're not the only one. I think that's something that when you're looking for a role, you want to keep it in mind. I think that the challenges are so many companies are dealing with uncertainty. We're going into an election cycle. Or I should say the tail end of one, right? Because it's coming in a couple of months. I think also, the economy itself and how it's impacted. And there's a lot of concern around, hiring talent acquisition people, especially because are there roles that are going to require someone to come in and be a professional, right? Those companies are really assessing whether they need to bring in those individuals, whether, based on the needs that they have. I think those are the big challenges right now.
There's challenges, there's mishaps of everything that's going on. I keep getting it on a continuous basis. What do I do? How do I make myself stand out? What do I bring to the table that's different? And as the outside recruiter, it is, for me, is to make sure that they understand who they are first and foremost, and that their confidence is as strong as possible, and that they forecast their value on a resume. And it's important that I make sure when I'm working with individuals that they have all of those steps and they understand what they're going up against and what's going to make them different from other people.
Yeah, and I think that the big things when you think about sort of going out there in the market, it's leveraging your network. I think now more than ever. You have to leverage the folks that each position is extremely competitive just given what's going on. And so it's reaching out to people within your network, sort of finding that secondary network through the people you're connected with, maintaining those connections too. It's not just reaching out to someone and then not following up, but also I think what's helpful is how can you help someone who's helping you? It's that comes to consistency, continuing to stay contacted or connected, and then also just patience and staying positive. I think we're all going through it. I know that's been a challenge for myself, right? Is just remembering, hey, I'm not the only one, and a lot of people I talk to who I've been networking with have said the same thing. Hey, Mahen, you're not the only one going through this.
And I have a hopeful success story. Old high school friend of mine has reached out to me for the last couple of weeks, and he has gone for the first time in his life 5 months without a job. Wow. He's going stir crazy. He sent me his resume, and I said, well, here's the first problem we have. And then I helped him with his interviewing technique because he was so wound up and full of energy that he had to learn how to slow it down. And then lastly, and Mahen, you actually said this perfectly, is the follow-up. You didn't realize, and this is a cue for everybody who's looking out there, you're allowed to follow up with people. You had an interview with Sally Sue, and Sally said, oh, you'll hear from me with 1 or 2 weeks. Well, if you haven't heard from her within that week time period, reach out. It's okay. Let them know that you're actually that type of person, that I'm not going to sit back and just, be complacent and just watch and wait. That when you hire me, I'm going to be this kind of individual. I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it and I'm going to follow up with you because that's who I am. And if you have a company that doesn't appreciate it, then you don't really want to go to work for that company.
Jennifer.
And so there's a lot of different things that people should be doing that I think they feel like they need permission to do.
Yes.
And you don't need permission. You need to be yourself and follow up and characterize yourself. That's going to differentiate you from everybody else, because as everybody knows, you're all looking for work right now.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to set you apart?
I have a question for you, Jennifer and Mahen. So right now, because everything is so much more virtual than it's ever been, I do feel like a lot of people aren't doing enough reach outs, and they're almost hiding behind their computer because it's become so easy to submit your resume to hundreds of employers at one time, and then they forget who they've submitted it to, or they just feel like they shouldn't reach out because it's not polite. Some of them feel like it's not, they should just wait. Do you feel like the person that does that reach out, it can sometimes make or break the decision on if they're trying to decide between them and another few people for a position?
100%. But you want it to.
Exactly.
You really want to make that difference. And if it's going to be between John or Joe, and John's the one who steps out of the box and said, remember me, we spoke a week ago, this is what I can offer you. And Joe's the one who's sitting back going, well, you said you were going to follow up with me, so I'm just going to wait till you follow up with me. Who are you going to more apt to actually hire?
Exactly. You're right.
And I think also just from the internal recruiter side, which is where I came from, if somebody's leveraging their network, if somebody's reaching out to different people within the firm, and that person is coming to me as the recruiter, or they're able to name drop that individual, I can go back and just, you could do almost a soft reference with that individual. Hey, listen, I spoke with Jennifer on the phone, and she mentioned that you referred her. What do you think about, her? Can she do the job? Here's what we're thinking. Those internal referrals are so strong. And so if you're able to get those, that's another way that you're going to differentiate yourself, especially when you think about a time like this, and for every job, there's probably, 200, 300 applicants.
Yeah.
Not all of them, are going to be relevant to the role, but what's important, I think there's a lot of them that are going to be very close to each other. And so the ones that have those connections are going to stand out, and they're going to be top of mind, especially when somebody, a senior business line manager or, someone who you respect internally comes to you and says, hey, you should look at this person.
It's a wonderful feeling. I have more and more people who are coming up to me and say, hey, I applied at ABC. Do you know anybody there? And I'll look and I'm like, oh, I actually know 3 people there. What are you looking for? And if I really, really like them, and I've worked with them before, and I've actually interviewed them and spent time with them, it is so much fun to get on that phone or send a quick email or LinkedIn message to Sally Sue and say, hey, you've got John Smith over here that you're about to interview. I'd give a thumbs up, and you're completely nuts if you don't consider him and push him as fast forward as you possibly can. And it's kind of fun because I get so many different remarks. I didn't realize you did that for me. And I said, why not? And what we do, with what Mahan and I both do with our connections that we have, let us. So if you have other recruiters out there that that you're connected to and you actually have a good reputation, use it. But just put on your subject line, and I keep telling this for thousands of years since LinkedIn has been out there, on the subject line, make sure you say, I need your help. Mm-hmm. That's going to grab their attention faster than anything else. And who doesn't want to help somebody, especially during this time, and see what they say.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and say, when you're reaching out and getting those referrals, you want to be specific and say, hey, listen, this is the role that I found. This is the person that I would like to meet with, or that is the recruiter on this role, or here, this is the hiring manager. I think when you can be specific, it really helps the the person making the reference. It gives them direction. It gives them guidance, and they know what to do, as opposed to a generalized sort of, inquiry. Hey, can you introduce me to someone? Or I'm thinking about this role. It's a lot tougher for someone to come in and have to, to get that inquiry and then have to look around and say, well, who's the recruiter? And let me reach out to them. And I don't know enough about the position. And
right.
It's a lot of extra work that you're asking somebody to do for you. And it just puts them in a tough position at the end.
Right.
Quick question for you. So since we have internal and external experience here, for someone that was looking for a job, are there different tips for standing out if you're working with someone on the internal or external end? Would the tips that you give to stand out be different, or do you feel like they're very similar?
I don't think I could answer that for Mahen because I've never been an internal recruiter. And I don't think Mahen could actually answer that because he's never been an external one. So I would hope they'd be different. I really, really would hope. When I have somebody when I'm on the outside, my client is 100% responsive to me. Where I would hope, and Mahen, please butt in, his responsibility is for the whole company, even though he's got different rec loads. So it's very different, and there's no right or wrong. It's just very different, and how you correspond, how you relate, and how you treat them are all the same, though.
Yeah, and I think that stays, that the way you treat them stays, I think it holds true for internally. I think internally, you talk about standing out. You have to remember, I think that, as a candidate, your background really well, and you need to guide the person on the other end. I think an internal recruiter, more often than not, they don't sit in the business. They're not an expert. And so it helps for you to connect the dots for them so that they understand what skills you're bringing, why you're relevant to the role. At the same time, you want to make sure that you as a candidate understand what are the important aspects of the role. So you have to carefully read the job description. You have to ask the right questions when you're speaking with the recruiter, when you're talking to the hiring manager. The candidate that can distinguish themselves is the one who's going to be able to, and I always use this analogy, you think of it as the candidates on one side of kind of a chasm, and the job or the hiring manager on the other. And the closer you can bring them, the closer you can bridge the gap, the less of a risk you become in terms of, hiring that person. Right. So you think, oh, well, you know what, this person is a really good, they're the perfect candidate because their learning gap is significantly smaller than this other person who maybe I don't know enough about them, or maybe they didn't explain themselves thoroughly. And so that perceived gap is significantly larger.
And where I come in on the opposite side is, yes, I'm a professional recruiter. My responsibility is to make sure that my candidate that I am representing gives all of their best on that interview. So plug for me, I'm a great prep person. I know how to prep people on an interview, and I use their stories, their analogies, their vocabulary when I help them, because I don't want them to hire me, I want them to hire that person. But it's super important that you know the questions to ask on an interview, how to ask on the interview, questions to stay away from, how to answer certain questions the right way based on who you are. There is a list of continuations that you don't know. And the only way I can sum up as how to have an interview is have a conversation. Literally just kind of be yourself. And I always kind of give out rules when you're on an interview, video or on the phone or in person. No Jekyll and Hyde, be yourself. Because if Jekyll gets hired and then whether having to hide, we don't know, you're going to get fired the next day. Before you get on camera, before you go on an interview, you look in the mirror, so you look good, you look presentable, and you're comfortable, because that's kind of really good. But mostly, and this sounds really funny, I get so much feedback on this, but have fun. Literally try and have fun on an interview, because it gets a chance for them to see your personality and who you really are. And if they don't like your personality, then you don't really want to go to work for that company.
You're absolutely right.
You're so right. And I'm curious, Jennifer, sorry if I can jump in and ask a quick question, because I think both of us on different sides of the coin have seen those common mistakes. What have you seen from candidates? And I could certainly share the mistakes I've seen job seekers make when they're coming in.
My biggest mistake I think that I see people do, number one, is they interview for themselves and not for the company. When you interview, your tone, your body language, and your mannerism has to be what's in it for the employer, not yourself. And then people will go, well, I'm supposed to interview them as well. Yes, you are, but your attitude has to be in it for the employer. They're the ones investing in you. The answers will tell you if you really want to go to work for that company, so don't worry about that. But your mannerism has to be really who you are with a really fun attitude of like, if you hire me, this is your ROI. This is what I'm going to bring to the table. This is the value that I will bring for you. And here's my number one favorite question that I have everybody ask, and I'm going to give it away to everybody. So watch out, Corey.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Nobody ever asked, and Mahan and I actually talked about this prior to it, and he loved it. But nobody ever asked on an interview, and it's your turn to ask a question, how can I help? How can I contribute? You ask that question, you have just set the tone for your entire interview as oh, this person actually cares for my company. They actually care on what they're going to do. And you will see just all of a sudden the shoulders are going to relax. The person who's speaking with you is going to all of a sudden feel very comfortable understanding you and where you're coming from.
I think that's a great tip. I honestly, myself, I've never thought to really ask that, but you're right. It does show that you care about the company and the employer and who you're working with. Great.
And in today's world, that's...
I loved it, and it's one of those ones, it's so funny. You work in this business for so long, you do this job, and then you hear some new and insightful ones. And I remember, Jennifer and I talked about it earlier this week, and I was like, wow, that's fantastic. I got to steal that from you now.
Well, then let's give plugs where it belongs. So my kids, they're all grown and everything else, but they were brought up in this industry, mom working from home and hearing about it the whole 9 yards. And probably about 10 or 15 years ago, my daughter's the one who came up with that. She's like, well, how come nobody ever asked, how can I help? You always told me I should ask, how can I help? And she was like 7, 8 years old when this came up with her.
Oh,
that's hysterical.
And I was just like, my girl. And I've been using it ever since.
wow.
So if you think about it, if a 7-year-old wants to hear that, can you imagine what an adult is going to want to hear?
Sure.
So
right.
plug to Raya. Good job.
You got your next business partner. There you go.
No, she wants nothing to do with what I do. She's a dog groomer and loves her job, so she's a phenomenal dog groomer.
She is helping. She's asking them how she can help.
Exactly. So, but I also kind of think, and I know we're talking a little bit about how you can interview, but I want to turn the table just a little bit, because Corey, you had mentioned that your audience is going to be a little bit on the HR side as well.
Yes.
And I would love to make sure that the HR people who are doing the interviewing actually know how to interview during what we're going through.
I think that's a lot of what people want to hear. It's very different now.
And you can't ask the same questions.
No.
And you can't ask with the same attitude. And if you're an HR professional and you're seriously not asking about their home life, their personal life, how they communicate, how they want to communicate, and are they set up to have an office? And what do you need? And my biggest thing with my training with my clients right now is, are you making room for the kids? I mean, that's huge right now. And it's going to take a couple of months for everybody out there. So if you think, how come I'm not getting hired? Just remember, HR professionals and managers right now are trying to figure out, how do I actually hire somebody? And they have first graders up to, 12th graders, and they're at home trying to go to school and being interrupted because they can hear somebody else in the other room with them. And if HR professionals are not asking those questions right now, you're not going to get the person that you want to hire, because it shows that you don't care. And you have to show that you genuinely care in a very authentic way.
Right. You do. And that's what people want right now. They want to feel like someone cares, because they need people to care right now. Everyone's going through a rough time. And I don't think honestly, I think everyone's going through a rough time in a different way. So it's not like some people have it tougher than others. They just have it in a different sense.
Yeah, they have to understand that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'd love to hear what are your tips or questions that you suggest that HR professionals ask in these interviews during our pandemic that's happening?
I kind of already mentioned it once. The first one is, how do you communicate? That has to be probably the first question, because are you an IM person? Are you a text person? Are you going to pick up the phone? Are you through Teams? What is your comfort level? And some of these questions, whoever's listening, they can be reversed. They really can. Probably all should be reversed at the same time. And we got down, how can I help? You have to be, and I learned this by watching a couple of webinars lately, you kind of really have to be transparent when you're interviewing. And are you structured? When you talk to the person, are your main competencies actually outlined? Your 3 to 5 main competencies. Does the applicant actually know what they are, what they stand for, and why they are for that position and everything else? The second one, HR professionals, this is huge for you. Do you have a diverse panel of interviewing?
Yes.
And are you working on that if you don't? And if you don't, but you can openly say that you are working on it, then you're covered. But if you don't, you need to address it, and now you need to figure out why. And at the very tail end, how are you handling debriefs? Mahan and I both can openly say, we get, what is the word? We get ghosted. I love that word for everything now, like the 2020 word. We get constantly ghosted from people. We don't know how we interviewed. We don't know what's going on. HR is not giving us feedback. If you're an HR professional, take 45 seconds out of your day and give them that feedback. Good, bad, or indifferent. If you don't know how to debrief somebody, hit me up. I will teach you how to debrief somebody on an interview. And so will Mahan, because both of us done it.
You really, Jennifer, you touch on something so important that I've always believed in, and certainly when I've mentored junior staff, or even when I have my team, it's that white glove service, right? You want to explain, and you talk about structuring your interview. Well, one thing I've liked to do, I've always enjoyed doing, or certainly put into practice, is the first thing, I talk to a candidate, I explain what's the structure. Here's how this interview is going to go. Here's the process. Here's how many people are in the, going to interview you. Here's how many rounds. Here's when you should expect to hear from us. And then you stick to it, right? It's about having that white glove service. It's about also understanding that as a recruiter, as an HR professional, you're the first point of contact. You're the primary point of contact, and you're representing your company. So how you engage a candidate, how you treat them, that's going to be that's the impression that they have. And even if they don't get the job, how you turn them down is just as important as if you advance them. And so if you spend an hour with a candidate and then shoot them a standard email, hey, you didn't get the job, thanks. Sorry, please apply. Yeah. It just leaves a bad taste. But if you call them up and you explain, hey, this is, I'm sorry you didn't get the role, but here are the 1 or 2 points that here's why, you didn't make it, but somebody else did. Right. They walk away understanding it, and it gives them a sense of, oh, you know what, they do care. And you can go back to that person down the road, or maybe they'll apply for another job. It's really important. And one thing that recruiters sometimes forget to do is asking the hiring manager, well, why didn't this person, why aren't you going to advance this person? And really pushing them. I think we all have a tendency to not want to, because it's just, they weren't a good cultural fit. Well, no, walk me through it, explain it. I'd like to give some feedback. Is there something you can tell the candidate? Right. I think those things are really important.
I just want to tell a really quick personal story to touch on your bad taste comment, because it's so true. I interviewed back in the day with a company, and the interview went great, but they ended up not offering me the position. So I interviewed with a different company in the same industry. I got the position, and within that first year, I was top in the company. And so then all of a sudden, I get a reach out from their new person in recruiting that specific company, asking if I'd be willing to, do another interview. And to be honest, what I got from them, the rejection was a standard email. It wasn't personalized. It didn't give me any feedback. And I was very honest with the new person in recruiting there. I said, truthfully, it's not that I'd be against it. I'm more against it because of the way they treated me and the way that I saw that they handle their follow-ups after an interview. I mean, whether I got it or not, it would have been nice to feel like a person and not just a number. And so I didn't do it for that one reason. You're absolutely
right. And I guess the advantage that I have as an individual recruiter is my applicants always know why they didn't get it, because it's set in my contract with my client that they have to give me feedback. And so that's the advantage of going through an outside recruiter, is I actually know why every person did not get that job.
But you also, Jennifer, you also work with executives, right? So those
all levels.
Yeah. Oh, you do all levels. Okay, sorry. I was going to say, with executive recruiters, there are very specific and tangible reasons that you can identify for someone not getting the role, right? And as you sort of get further down, you sort of get to the more junior roles. It's a little bit tougher, right? Because there's a little bit more of a, and this is what hiring managers have sort of said to me in the past. Well, I just had a better feeling about this person, or they're the ever amorphous cultural fit. They're a better cultural fit, right? As a recruiter, as an internal recruiter, it's important to really press and say, okay, well, what is it about that? What is it that you liked about this one versus the person that you're negating? And it's really important now that we're bringing in things like bias and inclusivity, right? You want to make sure that you're not sort of looking at the cultural aspect just because that person went to the same schools as everybody on your team, or they played, they played specific sports. Right. And I say this coming from
had that conversation.
Well, coming from a trading background, where when I was working at an investment bank, on the desk, a lot of times it's, I really like, people that played, team sports, because that shows that they really understand how this business operates. And it's, well, yeah, that could be the case, but there are other activities that promote that type of teamwork.
Exactly.
What about somebody that's in a band? What about somebody that's, was in in the orchestra, or, was part of a big project? There are other aspects where someone operates as a team. And so you don't want to go down that narrow path. And you're starting to see that more as companies look at what I would say are non-traditional candidates for these frontline roles.
Yeah, there's a lot of different avenues. HR professionals and hiring managers, they have a lot on their plate right now. They did before, but now it's even worse.
Yeah.
Maybe we have, not only do you have to worry about diversity and inclusion, you shouldn't have to worry about it, you should have it, number one, hint, hint. But I'm an advocate for transitioning military spouses. That's my pay it forward, and that's what I deal with. And for the last couple of years, they actually kind of got good treatment. And now I'm trying to tell them, I'm like, you're not going to get that special treatment anymore, because now employers just need to hire regardless.
Right.
And we have to remind them that you can't hire just regardless. You have to hire the right person for the right reasons. So as HR professionals, you really need to go back and kind of look at what you've done before, because there is no such thing as the normal. It's an abnormal. And if you go back to the normal, you're screwed. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to put out there for you. So.
Well, and I think also, just as HR professionals, you talked a little bit earlier about structuring your interviews. And I think it's really important that if you're the recruiter, if you're the person that's driving the search process, that's driving the interview process, you talk to your panel and you find out, and you really think about who's going to ask what, who's going to test on what competencies, who's going to ask, focus on what areas, what questions, and what everybody is doing, so that everyone has a purpose, as opposed to having a candidate retell their life story 5 or 6 times in a row.
Or have them ask the same question for 5 people in a row, really quick. I had that one time. It was an all-day interview, and I knew it was going to be an all-day with lunch in between and everything else. And everybody asked me the exact same question. And it was, how do you like to be a program manager?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm a recruiter. I am not a program manager. And by the 4th time, I finally had to stop the person and say, why are you asking me a question that I don't even do? Well, it's on the list of things that I'm supposed to ask you. And I'm like, then you don't know your audience, because I'm not a program manager, I'm a recruiter. Let me tell you the questions you should be asking me, and then let's kind of go for that and see what happens. So spot on, Mahan. You have to know your audience. You have to have the questions. And if it's not going to be in a panel and it's going to be individually, make sure everybody's asking different questions. Please don't do that to your candidate.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen this, Jennifer. I'm certainly curious. I think we sort of alluded to this in our earlier conversation, but now, because of the importance of understanding what the strengths and weaknesses of candidates are, and also to maybe help compensate for the fact that you're not sitting in the room across the table, we're starting to see firms use a lot more of those personality tests, those assessment tests like Hogan or Wonderlic or Burke. And I don't know if your candidates are experiencing that. I know certainly in my last role, that was one of the things that we did put into place, was an assessment test, especially for the mid to senior level hires that were coming in, so that we, part of it is an understanding how, the fit to the role, but also, from a talent management perspective of what areas we can, you can help an employee develop to make them more rounded. And, you talk about career progression and career development. That's the thing that candidates are looking for now, probably more so than comp, I would say, is, what can I do here and where can I go?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if you see that from your side of the table.
Always, to be honest with you. And assessments, there's a book on assessments, and you're pro, con, and you can be in between. I see assessments work for the majority of how to train that person, because this is the type of person that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Sales capabilities on assessments are good for that reason. And any other type of personality, if they need to know how smart they are, then there's Wonderlic. If they need to know how good they are, then there's the DISC. Yeah. So there are assessments out there. How you use them the right way, employers. Don't use them to waste your time. It's expensive. And some people just don't test well, but they're amazing individuals.
Yeah.
So take that to heart.
I think it's part of a process. I think it's something that you have to include as part of it, but not overweight it.
Yeah.
Exactly. I really want to touch on in-person interviews right now, from both sides, because I had a lot of people that are really anxious to hear your opinions on that. Job seekers especially, some of them have been asked to come in for in-person interviews, and they're not comfortable, but then they're also worried that they're going to lose the possible opportunity by not going in, especially if it's a job that can be handled remotely. And then on the HR end, how do you hire someone where eventually you might need them coming into an office or into a facility without meeting them in person? So I'd love to hear.
I've had that happen starting in end of March to May. I've actually had my clients say, this is how we would like to do it. What do you think? And it's more of the individual. If we know for sure that they're going to come back into the office when they're ready, then ask them, are you comfortable coming into the office? There's masks. We're all going to be 6 to 10 feet apart in the room. Is that going to be awkward for you? Are you okay? And as long as they say, if you're not okay with that right now and you want to do it over video, not a problem. But as long as I know that you're capable coming in once the ban is lifted. So you have to really ask that person, and you cannot judge a person by saying yes or no. There are people out there who will think, and this is again the permission side of it, if I don't go into the office, I'm not going to get the job. But I'm scared for my life if I do. You have to be honest with the person that's interviewing you. If you want to come into the office, you wear your mask, you make sure it's, everything is good, then you go. And if you're not comfortable, you tell them, I am not comfortable right now. I'm at a high risk. I have kids. I have older parents. I have a husband or a wife. But once I get the job and once we're allowed to come back into the office, I'm all in. So it's not cut and dry, but it is cut and dry. You have to make a decision for yourself.
And I think from a corporate perspective, I think you have to understand that you're creating a risk, you're creating a potential legal issue if you're making someone come in. I know that there are hiring managers that would feel more comfortable, especially as they look at more senior level hires within their team. If the role is it's higher in seniority, it's more impactful. They do want to sit across the table from that individual. My comment certainly early in the process is maybe you save it for the last candidate when or if you're down to the final two. I think you need to ask them if they're willing to do it. And maybe it's not in the office, maybe it's at a Starbucks if you really need to get in front of that person, or another sort of venue if you're not comfortable doing it as a video interview. And it's also just important to understand, maybe if you have to do it over Zoom, well, make sure you sort of have those questions, those issues, those concerns that you have, and you be honest with that individual, because that's going to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have to be flexible, and this is an unusual situation, and maybe you extend the hire out. And that's something I've heard before is hiring managers have said, what, I need to see this person. I need to see how they interact with my team. I need to see how they are, across the table. Maybe we make this hire in 2021 when we can get back into the office. Maybe it's not as important.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that people take the time to even reach out or comment on this post to directly ask you more questions, because there's got to be more. And I think that this is very helpful to all the job seekers out there and HR professionals that are interviewing. But I really do hope they take the time to reach out to both of you to really get more information, because there's so much more. And we can only fit so much into 30 minutes.
No, absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you. And yes, my name is out there on LinkedIn. If anybody has any questions, all of my information is on my LinkedIn profile. And so thank you, Corey. This has been fun. I have been doing this for years. And if you're an HR professional, have questions, hit me up. And if you're looking, hit me up, because I work both sides.
Perfect.
And I have all my information on LinkedIn as well. It's obviously just my name. And feel free to reach out. More than happy to help or just lend a perspective.
And he's looking for a new position, everybody who's out there.
That too.
And this guy is good. He's a senior talent acquisition manager. So I plug him.
Hire him.
Go hire him.
Thank you so much. You're too kind, Jennifer.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Corey.